A senior fellow at the John L. Thornton China Center at the Brookings Institution here in Washington, D.C. I spoke to him about Xi's visit to Laos and its importance.
Well, China is certainly a big player both in Laos and nearby Cambodia. China's pushing this Belt and Road Initiative, and frankly, some countries are taking it up quite enthusiastically, other countries less so. India is not very enthusiastic. But Laos and Cambodia are two countries that are borrowing a lot from China to finance infrastructure. If these are good projects in power and transport, then it's going to help these countries. I worry a little bit about the debt that they're building up. So I hope China takes a careful look at the debt sustainability for some of these countries. But basically, this is positive, and President Xi going to Laos is just expanding that cooperation.
One of the sentences from President Xi's comments at APEC said, "History has taught us that closed-door development will get nowhere, while open development is the only right choice." That's the kind of thing you might hear from a U.S. president in the past, but not so this time around. Give me your sense of just kind of the upside-down quality of the world that we live in today.
I think it's great to have Xi Jinping talking like that. If you go back a few decades, it was generally the rich countries like the United States that were open and talking about opening, and most developing countries were following closed strategies, what we call import substitution. And so, as you say, the world is flipped. So now China and quite a few countries in Latin America, Southeast Asia, developing countries, they're now the advocates for globalization. They see the benefits of open markets. And a lot of rich countries are looking inward and wondering if they want to continue this pattern of globalization.
So, it's interesting. We started with the contrast. Maybe we can finish with that as well. APEC, you heard from Donald Trump. He had one vision. You heard President Xi's vision. The U.S., of course, turning its back on the TPP since Trump became president. China is showing even more engagement with the region. So give me your sense of what all of this means long term.
I think long-term, the United States is withdrawing from Asia to some extent, and that's really leaving the door open for China. I personally welcome China's success and in what is in some sense China's rise, but I think a lot of countries in Asia are looking to the United States to balance that, both economically and in the security realm. So it's very unfortunate to have the U.S. pull out of Trans-Pacific Partnership. The U.S. is not really offering any trade deals. This talk about bilateral deals, nobody's interested in that. That's the past. Modern supply chains require multilateral agreements. President Xi is talking about the RCEP agreement. That's a multilateral agreement. The U.S. is really just pulling out of the game.
I remember the sage of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, a famous quote from him that the problem with the United States is they feel like Asia's like a movie. You can pause it, go in another room and get popcorn, come back in later. You really can't do that. Is that what you see here?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look, say, at ASEAN, for example, which is the heart of the Southeast Asia region, those countries now have twice as much trade with China as they do with the U.S. Their trade with the U.S. has been stagnant for years. Their trade with China has doubled within a relatively short period. So these countries are looking at China as the growing dynamic economy, and the U.S. could provide a lot in terms of rules, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership was aimed at deepening integration and having rules for intellectual property rights and investment. And now the U.S. is withdrawing from that. So it really is leaving a vacuum in the region, and China is naturally expanding into the vacuum.